Good. Get one for her too. Before we get started, I'm not sure who did the work or who did it, but up here there's a bunch of crosses. I believe they're made out of cedar, if I'm not mistaken. That just say a little tag that says "Remember Him," and obviously take one. And so go ahead and grab one of those, and I know it meant a lot to somebody to be able to do that, and they did a good job on it also. And so those are there, and make sure before you leave today, if you're interested, you go ahead and pick one of those up. Well, we are spending a couple of weeks talking about and looking at what the Bible has to say about the office of eldership. And we looked last week at some of the works that are involved with that, and we looked at some of the original words and the way that they're translated, but most importantly, what those words mean, what's indicated by them. And we spent a considerable amount of time looking at that, and really it helps to show the various aspects and responsibilities of those who would serve as an elder in the Lord's church. And I told you what I wanted to do today is spend some time in looking at what the Bible says as far as actual qualifications are concerned. Because there are obligations, there are requirements that God sets on this for anyone who would hold that office, that they need to meet certain specifications, certain requirements or attributes that they need to have that are outlined for us. And what I thought we would do is just go in order. We will look beginning at 1 Timothy 3, if you want to be open in your Bible there, and move through them. And they're obviously, when you look at parallel accounts, and that's what we have in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1, that there will be a good deal of repetition there, but then I think that there's also some specific things that you can bear out from one account or the other. And so when we're done with 1 Timothy 3, what I would like to do is then go over to Titus 1 and move through any there that we didn't cover already in 1 Timothy chapter 3. And some of the terms, though not identical, the attribute that's being described is really the same in application with both of the words, and so I'll try not to double up too much. But 1 Timothy chapter 3, and if you would, follow along with me. I'm going to read the first 7 verses. 1 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 7. This is a faithful saying, if a man desires the position of bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then, and then it gets into the qualifications that I want to take a look at today, must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are without, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Several things here that we want to look at, and as I said, I wanted to move right into verse number 2, especially and following, and look at some of these specifics that are here. And the first one that I want to bear out, we find that an elder is one who must be blameless. Blameless. In other words, he's doing the best that he can to live his life above reproach. Blameless does not mean perfect, but it more actually has the idea of being faithful, a person who is blameless. And so again, he's not perfect, but he has the quality of life that people can't come out and claim that he is an unfaithful person. That's just, it's not something that would stick with him. People know him better than that when they know that this guy is a blameless person. The second thing that we find out, and y'all jump in here on these, and Mr. Mike, Mr. Chris, y'all jump in on these with me and help me out. And anybody who has questions, I try to, I try in looking at this and studying it, not just this week, but over a long period of time. I try to anticipate questions that might come up. I have questions myself that I try to deal with on my own, and I do a lot of thought on it, and I bounce it off of others and other preachers, and I have a little group that I have on Facebook that's a private group of just all of the graduates of the Memphis School of Preaching, all of my fellow graduates and instructors, and sometimes I'll see some questions there that help me, and sometimes I have posed questions there just as kind of some general thought or some logical answers in a variety of ways. And so I've tried to take as much in as I can, but you might have a question here today that I've never thought of, or some ways of looking at some of these that I hadn't considered, and so I do want you to jump in. The second thing we find out here is that the husband, this man, that he's to be the husband of one wife. Now, I've seen some who have said that means, all that means is that he must be married. Well, obviously, if you're going to be the husband of one wife, you have to be married. But if it was nothing more than that he just has to be married, then it could have just said that he needs to be a husband. It's more specific than that. It says that he needs to be the husband of one wife. And that's a different way of saying what could have otherwise been said, that he just needs to be married. Now, first of all, obviously, and one thing that I've seen that a lot of folks have said is that means it speaks against polygamy. Obviously, he's only married to one woman. There are a lot of cultures in our world, even though ours currently does not happen to be one of them, where polygamy is a very, very real problem. Well, if a person was married to several women, he would obviously not be qualified to hold the office of elder. But especially what that little phrase means is that you put into the office of elder a man who is known as being a one-woman man. He's known as being a one-woman man. Someone has said that the qualification here is that he's married and he's not a womanizer. It's two things: a one-woman man, a man who's married, and he's not a womanizer, he's not a woman chaser. And now there are a lot of other questions that come up with this that I've seen people to bring up. Any other thoughts on that? Husband of one wife, married, and not the kind of reputation of somebody who's out there chasing after women. He's got to have both of those qualities. Two things that I would think about. Van asked about Matthew 19, and that's Matthew 19:9 especially is a verse on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. The question that sometimes arises, and there's a couple of scenarios, and either one of them can be addressed to get to the same point. One of which is, what if a guy is married and his wife dies, and then he gets remarried? So now he's had two wives. He's been married twice. Well, I do not think that disqualifies a person. That's not the intent or the message of these words. The idea here is that he's married and that he's not a woman chaser, not a womanizer. And sometimes unfortunate things happen, and a person is remarried. According to Romans chapter 7, 1 through 3, it is the case that a person can be remarried if their spouse dies, and so it's not an unscriptural position to be in. And so I don't believe that disqualifies them, as long as they're still not a womanizer. The other qualification that comes up alongside of that, or question regarding this qualification that Van mentioned, is what about marriage, divorce, and remarriage? Maybe a little more delicate, or a little more touchy of a situation. Number one, if the guy that we're talking about was divorced and remarried, and he was the guilty party, he is disqualified. By definition, this guy's going to have a reputation of being a womanizer because he stepped out of his marriage. And so he's going to be disqualified. But what about an innocent party? Well, the Bible allows, obviously, for a situation, and no sinful stigma attached to it at all, where a person can be divorced and remarried and that they were the innocent party in that situation. they're not, if a person is scripturally divorced and remarried, they're not married to two people. The one was put away, that situation is ended, just like in Romans 7, 1 through 3, that situation ended with the process of death. Well, this one ended with the process of what God allows for the unfortunate situation of divorce and remarriage. And in my opinion, nothing here is condemning that. He's married to one person as long as he's the innocent party and not a womanizer. Now, if a person would say, well, no, he's got two wives. Well, that means he's a polygamist and he's lost anyway. He doesn't have two wives. And so it would have to be a situation where the person was an innocent party. I do not think that there's anything in the text here that would disqualify that person from the position if they were the innocent party. He already paid me for your funeral, actually. Go ahead. Okay. And so we have someone who is an elder, they're married, and their spouse dies. That's one I hadn't even thought about as far as addressing today, but I have talked about it before. My thought on that is that at that point, the individual becomes disqualified. I believe that you have to, the person, with any of these qualifications, you can be qualified, and down the road, something can happen to where you become disqualified, and a person would need to step aside. Now, I have seen a situation where an elder was in the office and his wife passed away, and with that, he stepped aside. A couple of years later, he remarried a wonderful woman in the church and was reappointed as an elder. I think that that's perfectly legitimate. But I do think that he has to be a married person. With any one of these qualifications, you can be in a situation to where you're unqualified with any one of them. And my way of thinking and what these words actually mean, I think that would be one of them. Anyone else on that? Because this is one, I mean, we've got a list here, but this is one that usually generates some questions. I appreciate that one. That was a good one. All right. We're told next in the text that he is to be vigilant. What that means is this is a person who they're going through life with their eyes open. They're wise. They are cautious about situations that happen in life. We have had recently a vice president who was kind of noted for the idea that he would not conduct a meeting with a woman in his office if the door was closed or unless someone else was there. Just because he didn't want any accusations to come up against him and just to do the best that he could to keep that the case. In my opinion, I thought that was a very wise and cautious way of handling things. Pretty smart. A lot of people made fun of him for it. I thought it was pretty wise and pretty cautious in my opinion. And so there are a lot of situations that arise where for a person to be qualified, they're careful in the way that they look at some things. Again, they're not perfect, but they try their best to handle some things along the way that would be seen as being a vigilant person. He's aware of what sin can bring to his own life. He's careful to keep it from himself. But he's also vigilant when it comes to having concern about some sin in somebody else's life. That's going to be an important part of his work as an elder. He's not just concerned about himself. He needs to be. That's part of being vigilant. But as a shepherd, he's concerned about being vigilant about others as well. And so that's an important quality. Number 4, we read that he is to be sober. This has the idea of making good judgment calls. Situations arise in life where he has to make some decisions, sometimes on behalf of other people, and he's going to be good at making some of those. There was my old buddy Stephen Sutton. Did y'all see what he put on Facebook last night? I thought it was pretty funny. But a situation where basically, what do you do if you're in a restaurant, you're there with your family and kids, And the table next to you, they're cursing, they're using vulgar language and all of those things loud enough to where your table and your kids can hear it. What do you do? And he put some different scenarios of what you might do. And man, there were a bunch of responses of what people put there. And I told him what I did on one occasion is because if you're going to be a person who is sober or making good judgments, you kind of evaluate the situation and what's the best way to handle it to where a situation like that, I really don't want to get in a fist fight right here in front of my family. I really don't want my family around this. I would like to do it in a way to where I leave a good impression with everybody. What do I do? And so on this one occasion, this was happening, and I remarked to the person that was doing it, listen, if I wanted my kids around filthy, vulgar language, I'd have left them at home alone with their mom. All right? And the guy, he was kind of just stunned by what just happened. But everybody had a little bit of a laugh for a second, and there was no more language that happened the rest of the night. And so just kind of diffusing the situation. That may not be the best example of being sober-minded, but there are different situations in life that happen where this guy tries to approach it in a way where there's some wisdom. The idea here also is serious about spiritual things. He can have a sense of humor. Matter of fact, he's going to be better if he has a sense of humor. That's an important quality in leadership, to be able to diffuse a situation, to be able to laugh, to be able to laugh at yourself, to have a sense of humor. And at the same time, you know that while I'm a funny person or while I have a sense of humor, there are some things that are still very, very serious. And you can walk that line. Being sober-minded doesn't mean that you have to just be going around grumpy all the time. That's not what's indicated here. Number 5, we're told that he's to be just generally here of good behavior. The idea is just self-control. Looking it up, the idea really carries with it organized, a life that shows plan and purpose. He's got some structure to him. We maybe look at this and say, we think about good behavior, we think about kids doing everything that their parents told them to do or something like that. Well, the idea here really is showing some plan and some structure and some purpose in his life. You don't have to worry about this guy just being just a loose cannon with his life when he's representing and different things like that. There's a plan and there's a purpose and there's some structure to him that you can count on. Number 6, an elder is to be given to hospitality. In other words, he's in touch with the feelings and the needs of other people. A lot of situations arise where people are hurting or needy for a lot of reasons. And this guy's in tune with that. He can be touched by it. Hospitality is going to be really closely connected with compassion. So he's touched by people like this. He's friendly. He is warm. Not just that he feels sorry for people in need, but he can go a step further. He can do something to help you out. Yes.
Get something on you or bringing stuff up that don't need to be brought up.
Right.
And you have to be soberly minded.
Yes.
And hospitality to treat them in a way to not offend them.
Right.
So you can do it off leads.
Sure.
By saying something that you shouldn't say. You would like to probably approach it as a human being in another way.
Right.
But as far as the church and as
Sure.
far as God, that you're representing here, that you don't need to do that.
And even with that, you're not going to be perfect at it. There are things where you look at it and Mr. Mike can go home at the end of the day and tell Miss Louise, man, I wish I had said that differently. And that's going to be a part of the equation. But you're conscious of it, and you want to do. And then because of the wisdom of this, sometimes an elder recognizes that some of those same people need to be talked straight to. And not just, kind of flirting around the edges with it. But But that's why they are where they are, because they have an ability to do that. Hospitality. We had a situation this week where an individual was in a situation where they needed some help, and so we loaded up and went to another town, and it just so happened that the need was they were running on 2 flat tires. Well, it just so happens that I know an elder who's given to hospitality. And we were able to take him over to his shop, and he hooked her up with a way to get her going, and we took him back over there and got her hooked up again. And there are situations that arise in life where you know what? Sometimes people are hurting, and you got an opportunity to do something. And he recognizes that. Apt to teach. The Bible says he needs to be apt to teach. This is a person, and I would put this one very closely with Titus 1:9. And I said we'll get to Titus 1 later, but the Bible is its own best commentary. And so right with this one, I would put Titus 1:9. Does anybody have it where you can go ahead and read it for me real quick? Mr. Mike, do you have it there?
Yeah.
Titus 1 and verse number 9.
Holding fast to the faith of the word, as he has been taught, that he may be able, by the sound doctrine, both exhorting and convicting those who are contradicting.
Very good. And so you've got some commentary on the teaching there. This is a person who holds close to the truth. He's always willing and ready or able to teach somebody whenever the situations come along. He's got the ability to take what the Bible says and help somebody else apply it to their lives. And this is like with a lot of these, as we've always said, they're not just qualifications for elders, they're qualifications for Christians. This is one of them. 2 Timothy 2:2, we need to be willing to teach those who are able to teach others also. And that's just a part of being a Christian. Everybody's got the responsibility of the Great Commission. This isn't just elders, but they need to be able and willing to do that.
And some people get in the mind that is supposed to be done in a classroom environment, out to teach.
Right.
Yes, that helps, but like you said, you should be able to come upon someone and talk to them and tell them what to do.
Right.
It's just not classroom.
There are a lot of things that unfortunately people have disqualified in their own mind someone from being an elder with things that I don't believe disqualifies them. Doesn't say anything here about a classroom setting. And I've been in situations before, not in this congregation, where someone was suggested as an elder, and the response came back, well, they've never taught a Bible class. They never teach Bible class. But I know the person, and they are regular about sharing their faith with other people, okay? Not everybody is good at teaching a public Bible class. You say, you're one of them. All right, that's fine. But we need to be careful not to put our own physical human limitations on some words here beyond what the Scriptures mean. And so this is a requirement just like it is for the rest of us to be willing and able to teach. I was just thinking when you asked that, I've got a couple of materials here that I've got a lot, but there's one that I always go back to help me out on looking up some words and ideas and thoughts. And that's one of my old-time favorites is Brother Robert R. Taylor Jr. And he's got some extensive work, and that was specifically one of the things that was brought up. But some extensive work on the qualifications, and it's not in his book on elders, although that's a good one. It's just in his books on Titus, Philemon, 1st, 2nd Timothy. And they're good, and I would recommend them. He always does a very faithful job in looking at some of these things. Helps me to look at some things in a way that I never had. Number 8, not given to wine. This individual will not allow alcohol to destroy his influence if he's going to be an elder. And there are things that a person could do that would destroy their influence as far as the eldership is concerned, and based on what we read here, that would be one of them. He's not going to come under its sway because he doesn't want it to hurt what he's trying to do as far as the work of a shepherd is concerned. Number 9, the Bible says that he is not a striker. Simply the idea of hot-headed, high-tempered, that kind of thing. In other words, an elder needs to be able to work with people without just losing it on people. As much as sometimes he would like to. He's got to be able to show some restraint and contain himself and not just lose it on people. Again, he's not going to be perfect. Sometimes an elder is going to accidentally lose their temper. That's going to happen like it happens with everybody else in this room. But he's faithful in that that's not what he's known for. That would definitely be the exception to the rule. And so this person is a person who's able to work with other people without blowing a fuse. Number 10, we're told that he's not greedy of, some translations have filthy lucre, money. Love of money is the problem. The Bible lets us know that it's a very, very real evil, the love of money. And so this guy, he's not motivated by material things. He's motivated by spiritual things. That's what drives him. This doesn't mean that he can't have money. This doesn't mean that he can't have nice things or anything like that. It's just that an elder is a guy who wouldn't do anything to get it. He's not driven by it. He's driven by that which is spiritual. And sometimes spiritual people have some nice things along the way also. That's totally fine. But it's that idea of the love of money, driving force. Anything on these so far? That's 10 of them. All right, number 11, we're told that he is to be patient. You know, the Bible says a lot about patience. Normally we think about patience and we think about my patience is wearing thin. We think about a short temper kind of thing. But remember, the Bible also uses the word patience in connection with suffering and persecution. Suffering and persecution. And so an elder is somebody who, in hard times, they bend, they don't break. Elders are going to go through hard times. There are going to be struggles with family. There are going to be struggles with friends. There are going to be financial struggles. There are going to be work struggles. They're going to have a lot of things that are on their mind and that are concerning to them. Just like with anybody else in the room. But they're able to bend with that. They don't allow those things to break them. They make them stronger at the end of the day. And that's a quality, again, that every one of us need to have. Number 12, very similar to something we looked at earlier, is the idea of his temperament. Not a brawler. He's not a person he's not one of those guys with a chip on his shoulder just walking around looking for a fight. I dare you to say it to me. Try me. See how it goes. He's not that kind of person. It's not easy, but an elder knows how to disagree without being disagreeable. That's one of his qualities. There are some people that will argue with a brick wall. That's not who he is. He doesn't have an appetite for that kind of thing. Sure. Right. Whatever it is, it's changing their personality when they're under its influence, and he's not going to allow that to happen. And so he's not a brawler. Number 13, we're told that he is not covetous. Again, that kind of gets back to the financial side of things. This is a guy who can be content with what he has. Not always desiring what everybody else has, not greedy in that sense of it. And a person who's an elder is not worried about the old expression, keeping up with the Joneses. That's not what drives this guy. That's not his life's goal. Again, he might have nice things, but that's not the motivating factor of his life. It's not the kind of person he is. Next, we're told that he rules his own house well. And in addition to the one on marriage, this is usually one of the ones that gets the most thoughts and comments because there are so many variables out there that we can think about. Titus adds, and we just bring the two accounts together, that he's to have faithful children. And the idea here is that while his children are under his roof, while they're under his influence, that they're being led in the right direction. They're faithful to him. They're right before their parents, and they're right before God. And the Bible lets us know really what it's talking about itself in the next phrase when it lets us know what he's saying is not insubordinate, not unruly, not rioters, and so you're one, not the other. And so it's given us the direction of the person's home. Now, go ahead.
I do think that if a elder's son becomes of age of accountability, and we talk about that age,
Right,
various ages,
right,
that they should probably talk to them and settle them down and convert them to be Christians.
right.
That doesn't mean that every one of his children, I don't think, should be a Christian.
I agree.
And you think, well, it says children, and that's plural. You don't go up to a Banana Steakhouse and it says children, come in, eat three. Well, if you just got one, does that mean, he can't eat three?
Right. And you stay right here in the book, and he says, children, obey your parents in the Lord. And if I only had one kid, they look at that and say, well, the Bible says children, you only have one, so I don't have to listen to you, Dad. No, and that's not the way, it's exactly what you're saying. And so a lot of possibilities of things that come up. One of them is what Mr. Mike mentioned. Does he have to have more than one child? No, that's not the way that the Bible uses this word. One or more is the idea. Children, obey your parents in the Lord. Does that mean if you only have one, they don't have to obey? No, that's not the way that the word is used. And so we keep that in mind.
And also, if you have two children, they're close age and they have become Christians, and you're a strong elder, and everything is all of a sudden later in life, something happens and you have a baby. Then what happens?
You have something you want to tell us?
No.
Okay. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a good illustration because there are a couple of scenarios here to think about, and that's one. Sometimes people have, I believe, bound too much on this, and it's actually one that I talked about in my preachers group over the last couple of weeks, to suggest that every single child that they have has got to be a Christian. And so I looked at Brother Taylor and I got what he thought. I looked at some others. I talked on the group. But Chris, let me just use you for an illustration here. So we've got old Chris here, and we've got Cole and Court and Sadie, and one's married and two are in college and doing well and faithful, and we're proud of them, and I know he's proud of them. But for whatever reason, let's say there's a scenario that happens where, oh wow, number 4 is on the way. All right? Just because they have another child that enters the scene doesn't mean that, boom, all of a sudden he would become a disqualified person. That child is not in rebellion or a disbeliever in God. The term I use is pre-believer. They haven't believed yet. They're not even eligible to do that yet. And so I've thought that, and then I went back and looked at Brother Taylor, and that's exactly the way that he enumerated it also. And I got on my group because I wanted even more thought and clarification from as many minds as I could have. And to a man, every single preacher and instructor that I ever had agreed with that idea. That now there might be a situation where this youngin comes along, Chris Barrett IV comes along, and 20 years down the road, that kid's tearing up Dover and got a bad reputation. Well, then we would get to the point now where because of that, I believe Chris would become unqualified. Right. Yes. Yeah. And that's a third scenario here. Is the Bible is very specific to tell us that these are qualifications in regard to your own house. And so you can do your job and train your children properly and bring them up and they obey the gospel. And then out of their house, 20 years down the road, they become unfaithful for whatever reason. That's on them. The soul that sinneth, it shall die. The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father. The father shall not bear the iniquity of the son. The Bible is very clear about, we don't teach the impossibility of apostasy, that it's impossible to become unfaithful. Unfaithfulness is a real possibility for every one of us. And when they're at home, well, they're headed in the direction of heaven. But when they go out on their own, then they've established their own house. The qualifications here are for how he runs his own house. And they don't give an account for he doesn't give an account for them at that point. They give an account for themselves as adults. And so that's a third scenario to think about. But once they leave the house, they leave his rule. I believe children have got to answer for themselves. While they're home, while they're old enough, they obey the gospel. They're faithful to it. And when he says that he rules his own house well, by the way, I think that also says something about an elder's wife. That's a part of his household. And she's faithfully following the headship and the leadership of her husband. She's headed in the same direction he is. Normally we read these verses and a lot of people only remark about children. Well, the husband-wife relationship, that's also a part of his house. And she also needs to be headed in the direction of the Lord, headed in the right way. And so in order to be qualified, there are family qualifications that are necessary. And you've already thought of a couple scenarios there. If you have others, that's why we're here, to think about it and to consider what the Bible has to say about it. Clear as mud? I don't want to be like that. I want to make it really clear. But I do think that the Bible is specific in certain ways for a certain reason. It's specific to your house because it's not about someone else's house. And I think that that's an important thing to remember also. We're told next that he is not a novice. In other words, this person has been around a while. He's mature in the faith. Doesn't mean that he knows everything, but he's not just a new babe in Christ. He's got some roots. He's been around for a while. And so he's not going to be just one of those who's easily swayed by anything that he hears because he's got that depth. He's got some spiritual depth to him. Next, we're told that he's got a good report of them that are without. And so even people outside of the church think highly of him. Very similar to that idea of blameless that we started with. But we're reminded here that he's a shepherd in-house, but he's also trying to teach and evangelize like the rest of us out of house. And so he needs to be someone who's well thought of. You go over to Titus now. Go to Titus's account. We can pick up some things here that we would look at in addition to this. And let's begin verse number 5 of Titus 1. For this reason I left you in Crete, that you should set in order the things that are lacking, appoint elders in every city as I have commanded you. If a man is blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of dissipation or insubordination. For a bishop must be blameless as a steward of God, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but hospitable, a lover of what is good, sober-minded, just, holy, self-controlled. And then Mr. Mike read verse 9 for us a little while ago. And so we look at these and we find out that he's not to be self-willed. This is not a person who says, I'm going to take my ball and go home. It's my way or the highway. Everybody has to agree with me. He understands that he doesn't get his way every time. And he can deal with not getting his way sometimes. Every eldership with which I have ever been associated, present included, every one of them, they have not always agreed on everything that has come before them. But they can disagree in talking and in meeting, and even with the disagreement, they walk out united. And that's the kind of people that you're looking for, to be able to have that quality. A self-willed person can't handle it. It's got to be their way, or they'll fume and they will steam and they will fracture and cause all kind of problems. This guy recognizes it's not going to be the way I see it every time. Because they're dealing with a million different expediencies, expediting commands, and realms of judgment and handling those things. By the definition of it, there's going to be different ways of looking at it. And they try to come to terms with what is the right decision, what is best for the congregation. And even though they, again, may disagree on specifics, they get united with their ultimate conclusion. Titus tells us next that he's not soon angry, very similar to what we read about not a striker, not being a brawler, not having a short fuse kind of thing. Lover of good men. Got an appreciation for good people, for everything that's good. He's going to surround himself with some people that are going to help him to be better, to be stronger. His wife's going to be one of them, by the way. Good people. But he's going to select people who are going to help him out. Next, we're told that he is just. All that means is this guy, when he deals with you, he'll deal with you fairly. He's going to give you a fair shake. You may not always like it. You may disagree with it, but it's going to be fair. He's not going to mistreat people and be unjust. Another way of saying it, everybody's got a level playing field with this guy. It's a good way of thinking about it. Titus tells us that he's to be holy. That means he's a devout person. Sin doesn't run his life. Doesn't mean that he doesn't sin, but sin doesn't run his life. There's a big difference. Next, we're told that he's temperate. That means he's got control over his desires. And there are a lot of things that he might like to do. Like we talked about a moment ago, Mr. Mike. A lot of things he might like to do, but just because you would like to and you can doesn't mean you do. And so he can show some restraint in those different areas. Then we're told that he holds fast the faithful word. In other words, you know where the guy stands. Stands for the truth, stands for what's right, takes a firm stand in those areas. And so you have the qualifications of an elder. And again, some of these things double up and just a different way of saying a very, very similar quality. But they're all there. They're all there for a reason. They're all very, very important. I would remind us that with almost all of them, everybody in this room is supposed to have the same qualities. Almost all of them. Now, you don't have to be married to go to heaven. And you don't have to have children to go to heaven. But there's not much beyond that in this list that everybody else in here doesn't need to have anyways in order to go to heaven. And so we always want to keep that in mind and not hold people to a higher standard on things than we would hold ourselves as far as Christianity is concerned. All right. Any questions, thoughts, follow-ups, additions, subtractions? Mr. Chris? Mr. Mike? Anybody? Miss Louise? Yeah. We just do it on the front end and take care of it. Just be so much easier that way. Right. Let's get that ball rolling. Yeah, but you imagine that process where, a guy his wife dies, and then who wants to go back to the dating process? That's no fun. All right, but that's a hard scenario that he would be allowed to do that, but I think he could once again become qualified very quickly. Funny stuff. Y'all are a mess. Okay, Titus 1:6.
So, if you look at the different translations, you're going to see different translations of the word pistos.
Yes.
Faithful in some, believing in others. Some translations even say children who are believing. Now, if Titus 1:6 means, and I know what you said, but hypothetically, if Titus 1:6 says that, for those who believe that it says that children are
that's incongruent with Timothy. But yet, I mean, how can we trust the translation? Which translation is best? Because you look at that depending on translation that you've always read.
Yes.
And then that gets into your system, and so.
Okay, so here's what I would say about that. It's a great question. I always go back to the idea that the Bible is its own best commentary. And what he's doing is contrasting the conduct of someone who is faithful or believing as far as not being one who is making the decision to be riotous and unruly and just tearing up the town kind of thing. Anti-God, not just not believing, but unbelieving. And so a person who is unbelieving, I believe if his child was unbelieving, accused of riotous and unruly, that would disqualify him. And so that would definitely be the case. If a person is in a situation like I illustrated with my buddy over here, that child that maybe comes on the scene is not an unbeliever. They're a pre-believer. And Mr. Mike, you mentioned the age of accountability. That varies according to every person. Sometimes a person recognizes they're about that category, about 13. Others 16. On down the road a little bit, where they say, "I'm not mature enough yet for that decision." I had a study with someone not too long ago, and we talked about this very idea, and the young person just said, very clearly, I will one day, but I'm just not mature enough to do that yet. And I thought that was a pretty good statement of maturity, to recognize that I'm not mature enough yet for this big of a decision. And so now I might, an elder might have a situation where they have a child who is not yet a Christian. And like I said, it might get to the point on down the road, like with any of these other qualifications, where the child becomes a disbeliever and decides not to obey God, and then I believe the elder would become disqualified. But I want you to hear what Brother Taylor said about that very, very quickly. As always, I respect him a great deal. He must be above reproach in realm to serve efficiently. His children are to be faithful. They're to be faithful to him, faithful to God as Christians. This is true of all old enough to be Christians. He may have some who are Christians and some too young to be Christians yet. Negatively, they are not to be rioters or unruly. And I think that's the contrast here. When he's saying this is the quality they need to be, it's in contrast with someone who is an accountable age to be qualified as rioters or unruly. Rioters are unruly. If they are old enough to engage in riot and unruly in the community, they're old enough to be Christians. An elder should have one or more children who are Christians, even though some of his younger children may not be old enough to be Christians at the time of the appointment of the eldership. Yet even the younger ones should be respectful and delegated authority and work and responsible and obedient. Child and children are used interchangeably, and then we talk about that idea of how the words are used in the Bible, how children are to be trained. Does that mean if you only have one, you don't have to train them? Different things like that. And so it's a good thing to be conscious of, but like with any of these, a person could be a person who over time their temperament begins to change and they no longer have control of their temper. They would become unqualified as an elder. A person might have a situation where they got children at home and the children have obeyed the gospel, but one of those children just up and becomes a disbeliever and says, "I don't believe in God," and they start causing problems. Unfortunately, that child's still in the home. They would become disqualified. There are a lot of variables with this, depending on the situation, but we don't want to put stipulations on it that God did not, and be careful of that also. But I do think that the believer, the faithful there is, the commentary gives it for itself, is in direct contrast to someone who is of an accountable age to make the decision to be a rioter or unruly. One is in contrast to the other. What else y'all got? All right. Who did we call on today? Mr. Owen. Would you please stand, and we will all stand and be dismissed in prayer.